All right. Light parachute. Descending into heavy darkness like a monochromatic butterfly riding the currents into the abyss, the dark forest below, never to be seen again. All right. Whoa is right. This was written, 5 minutes before this episode, actually.
You're a poetic. You're a poetic prodigy. Hey, what is this? What is this?
Yes.
I was clicking on a link about D.B. Cooper, and the poem seemed to have something related to that. What are we doing?
Okay, let's bring Leonard on, since he seems to be, clamoring for attention here. This guy, what? He is D.B. Leonard today. Oh my gosh! All right,
hey,
so hello.
What up? Leonard. What up, bro?
Doing the show, we skipped a week or so since I was visiting folks in Georgia, and now we're back here. I'm tuning down the music a little bit. I understand last time our voices got drowned out, but
I don't think
love your headband.
Thank you. It's my customary swag.
As always, you have an impeccable style, and whatever amulet you're wearing.
I have some.
You have some good ones, that's for sure.
Yeah, I have some celery here to munch on.
All right, so kind of making me hungry, but that's all right. I figure things out after. So with that, let's. This is episode 227 of what used to be called SG2 on Space, but is now just called. What's the new name?
We have to think about that. I think it's
it's episode 227 of this continuous
curious journey.
Yeah, I like that. The curious journey. I was trying to put something in, but YouTube actually limits the title to 100 characters. For those of you who don't know.
Okay.
So the title of this episode is called "The Man Who Fell: What Really Happened to D.B. Cooper." (Parentheses, a critical examination). Before we go on and actually jump into this, I would like to say thank you to all those who are supporting the show either as a free or paid member. And you can go to patreon.com/SG2 on space. Thank you to the existing patrons, John Graves, Kyle Baker, George Jackson, Geoffrey, and Barnes. And as well as a few others that apparently have no names. I can't read them at least. So, but thank you for doing that. And like, subscribe, share this episode or other ones, of course. So, in this exciting episode, we're going to talk about a topic which I know almost nothing about. So I'm going to rely on the very knowledgeable Leonard Kramer here to illuminate the truth of what happened. So
I think I may have figured it out. I could be completely wrong.
So he says. But first, before we say whether we figured it out or not, what is the story here?
So this is the story of D.B. Cooper, which everybody can sit down and Google or whatever.
Not to be confused with D.B. Leonard, by the way.
No, I just thought I was just playing around there. So on the evening of November 24th, which was I think Thanksgiving in 1971, so 54 years ago. A man in a black suit stepped onto a Boeing 727, and he was bound from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington. The plane was a Boeing 727, which was a very unique kind of airplane. It has a entry stairway in the back, centered in the fuselage, so it goes straight down. And it also has a regular entrance near the front of the cabin. So he had a black suit. He stepped onto the plane. He was quiet, polite, and evidently trying to be very forgettable. And then he passed a note to the flight attendant, and she thought he was hitting on her, and so she just kind of put it in her pocket.
Right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I'm sure you thought about doing. Anyways, go on.
No. Actually, the flight attendants usually,
Oh, they're the ones that
Never
approach
mind.
you. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. So he passes a note to the flight attendant, and she's probably thinking, this guy's about to hit on me. But
Yeah, and so he stopped her. He stopped her, and he said, miss, you might want to read that note, because I have a bomb, right? And I don't think he said it. I think he said it, something like that. And
you mean just extremely, like, how should I put this? As a very casual sort of
very,
opening, right?
yeah, in a very casual manner.
As if he was asking for coffee or something. All right,
I get
great.
the impression. I think I read she said he leaned forward and he says, "Miss, I have a bomb. You should read that note." Something like that. And over the next few hours, that man that's known to history now as D.B. Cooper would hijack that plane. He demanded $200,000 in cash,
which was a lot back then.
4 parachutes.
Why
and
4?
Well, let's talk about that in a moment.
Okay.
In a
All
little
right,
while.
continue with the story, and then
the plane landed in Seattle. He released all of the passengers, and the passengers didn't even know what was happening. They said, "Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have mechanical trouble, and we have to turn back or we have to land in Seattle, and you need to get off the plane, right?" So anybody who had continuing flights or whatever. And then somewhere over the forests of Washington State, he jumped out, and no one saw him land. No parachute was ever found. No body. No money. No, just questions. So what we're going to talk about is not. There has been a kind of mythology that's developed about it. But I just wanted to talk about. I wanted to study it as carefully as I could, look at the facts, what happened, and what didn't happen, and what likely did happen. So to this day, the mystery is unsolved. The FBI has abandoned the case as of 2016. So there's some things that are absolutely crystal clear about what happened to him. My position, and I'll just start out that way, is that he died. He did his. I don't think his parachute opened. I don't know exactly why, but I think that he died, and his body parachute were never found. Some of the money was later found. So that's the kind of thing that's sort of the intro to what we wanted to talk about.
So what was his motivation? Just for money, right?
He said he wanted $200,000.
That sounds about right. And this guy, he had no, like, what is his background? Do we know?
We don't know. The short answer to that is we don't have a clue about who he was. Well, I shouldn't say we don't have any clues, because the way he presented himself, the way he accomplished this hijacking, kind of tells us some things about him. But there were never the plane was full of fingerprints, right? But because it's a plane, I mean, there were there's hundreds of people there, and in those days, the cleaning was not as careful as it is today. But even today, a plane is just going to be covered with fingerprints, and who knows what else from people.
I wouldn't want to know what's touching what on the plane.
Things like the Mile High Club or whatever. Maybe we don't want to talk about that. Okay,
yeah.
so let me set the scene.
This is a FBI, one of the FBI composite sketches of what it possibly looks like. Here's another one, and here's another one. I mean,
well,
it looks like a middle-aged Caucasian male who was wearing sunglasses of some variety, with short hair and a sit.
Yeah.
And a
so he doesn't look very remarkable.
He does not. And he doesn't really, there's not really much of a backstory to him that people know. It's not like he was someone famous or he's committed other crimes. No, he's just seemingly like an ordinary guy.
In the late 1960s and early 70s, air travel was much more casual than it is today. And if you look at old television programs from that era, people on planes, you'll see that individuals were able to go to the gate area. They
There's
didn't
no
have
security.
that.
Is that what you mean?
They didn't have the kind of security that they have today. And in fact, you could buy a ticket on an airplane without even showing your
ID,
your driver's license, ID or passport or anything. Well, you don't need a passport in the States, but in domestic flights. So, but in that era, it became, and I remember this because I was actually alive then. I was conscious and actually fairly precocious child, right? So I knew about these hijackings that were going on. Planes were being hijacked literally every few weeks, and I know people find that hard to believe, but it almost got to be a normal sort of thing, and comedians would make jokes about it on television. Most were diverted to Cuba, and
planes were hijacked every other week, and people just accepted that as normal.
There was a period, the golden age of hijacking. Between 1968 and 1972, there were over 130 hijackings that occurred in U.S. airspace, and so yeah, and if you turn on the evening news, and the news reporter would say another plane was hijacked, to Cuba, and even some comedy shows from that era, I've detected it in some reruns of shows like the Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, which I'm sure you've never heard of.
But thank you for that assumption, and your assumption turned out to be correct. Go on.
But I could remember. Well, we can talk about that. There's an actress named Goldie Hawn. She's right. No. Yes. No. Never heard of her.
How would I know?
Okay, never mind. It doesn't matter. Why we're talking about Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, I don't know. It just because it occurred to me that I remember them talking about, a joke where you weren't allowed. The directions were when you go to the airport, don't make any jokes about hijacking. Don't say anything because they're listening, And so they had a joke where one guy named Jack is going through the the inspection X-ray or whatever, and then another guy says, "Hey, Jack, hi, Jack," right? And so they arrested him. So it was a joke. It's not very funny when I tell it, but just give you an idea.
You're making the point that hijacking was extremely common at that point, the point where it was part of the popular mass entertainment of the time.
It started to become a cultural phenomenon. And so obviously it's not a good thing because it's dangerous, and so airlines were instructed to cooperate with the hijacker, so the hijacker could do whatever they wanted. And this was also the time when security was introduced. The baggages, they put X-ray scanners and metal detectors, which have become progressively more intrusive or more ubiquitous, and with stronger and stricter requirements, so that now they actually have a millimeter wave scanner that they can see you naked, which I'm quite proud of.
Okay. Oh my gosh.
So I call it the naked body scanner.
Oh my goodness, Leonard.
So I don't actually know if that's true or not. I'm just sort of trying to make light of it. But most of these planes were diverted to Cuba, and Cuba didn't really like it very much. And some of them went to Canada, and some of them went just nowhere. Just wanted to hijack the plane and make a speech. So the security was not non-existent, and so in the early 70s, they started to the authorities started to introduce ID checks and baggage screening, and seat. You would have a seat assignment, because in those days you could just sit anywhere you wanted, and really most of the hijackers wanted some headlines, or they wanted to make a statement about communism, or maybe just attention. But this guy, who was deemed D.B. Cooper, the way he took out his ticket, the way he bought his ticket, he just signed his name Dan Cooper, and one of the newspaper people misread it, and so they said DB. They read it as DB, but it actually says Dan. So that's where the DB comes from. He didn't, when he took control of the plane, he didn't make any shouts. He didn't stand up and read a manifesto or preach anything. In fact, he didn't even stand up. He just asked for money, $200,000, 4 parachutes, and then to be refueled in Seattle. And so that's what he was about. So the crime.
Right. I mean, it sounds like really straightforward to me, like exactly what he wanted.
Right. Yeah. And the ticket was one way. It was $20 in those days. $20. It was a short puddle jumper from Portland to Seattle, and he sat in seat 18E, which is kind of more toward the back. He ordered bourbon and soda, so he had a highball. And then we went through the ritual of him giving the attendant, and her name was Florence Scheffner, and she thought he was hitting on her, and he said, you better read this note. No, I have a bomb. He also opened the briefcase. At that point, he also opened the briefcase.
How was I guess security was so lax that you could just bring a bomb on board back then?
You could bring a gun.
And nobody would be like, oh, why is this guy bringing this on an airplane where he could possibly hijack it? Like, nobody cares.
I don't know if, well, I mean, that we starting in about 1968 or maybe a little earlier, airplanes started getting hijacked, and then the news gave it a lot of attention, right? So people hijacked some more. So what he dictated on the note. The note was typewritten. He wanted $200,000 in worn bills, used bills. He wanted only $20 bills. He didn't want any big bills. He wanted 4 parachutes. He wanted the fuel truck standing by in Seattle because he wanted to refuel the plane. And then when Miss Schaffner, when she notified the crew, they've radioed ahead, said we're being hijacked. He smoked cigarettes, Raleigh's.
Went to the flight attendant, right?
He drank bourbon, and so the FBI really went into action, and they were able to acquire the money from the banks in the area. I think I did read which bank gave the most of the money, but it was the cash from the Seattle banks. And I also looked into how the banks get indemnified for that. So that's a liability that the airline has to the banks, and I think it was adjudicated that way.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was going to say, so the FBI got this money, $200,000. $200,000 in 1971 would be worth probably just over 1.5 million today, 1.5. So so think that's what he's really asking for.
I mean, what? Okay, like that sounds like a great way to suddenly get a lot of money. I find this really, these people who, you said there's a hijacking every other week back then. Did all of them ask for parachutes to jump out of the airplane too?
No, most of them. The usual trope was, take me to Cuba, and then Cuba would arrest them, or would send them back, or give them asylum. That kind of thing. And we'd have to go through. I actually did do a little bit of study of the motivations of the different hijackers, but I didn't really record it or make much of that.
That's fine. We can always look at that later. But point is, like, he's unique in that he was the only one, as far as you can tell, who during this era asked for parachutes so he can jump out of the airplane.
Yes, so that was quite remarkable.
I can't imagine doing
on
that.
The money.
Okay. Yeah.
The money that was acquired from the bank, $200,000. The FBI probably got a team of people to sit down and either photocopy all of those bills so they could record the serial numbers or record them by hand. So that was a big job that they had to do really quick. They didn't mark the bills in any manner, but they did record the serial numbers. The parachutes they acquired from some skydiving school nearby, and there's some controversy about that as well. So in the late afternoon, early evening, about 5:39 is what my notes are saying. The plane landed in Seattle, and he directed that the passengers be released quietly. None of the passengers that were being released had any idea that the plane had been hijacked. And he kept the crew, and they delivered the money to him and the parachutes, and he looked at the parachutes. There was one of the parachutes was a military style parachute. The other parachute was sort of some kind of sports model. And then there were two reserves. So the 4 parachutes included 2 main chutes and reserve chutes, which is a typical kind of skydiving practice. So I'll talk about that reserve chute because there's a lot of stuff, a lot of noise in the DB Cooper lore about.
This leads to like clearly this guy DB Cooper, which is probably not his real name. He has obviously he has I would presume he has some experience jumping off of airplanes. So jumping out of airplanes. That's what I mean. Yeah.
I think so. I would think so. I would think so. So he gave the other instructions were after he received all of the stuff that he asked for. He gave instructions to fly to Mexico City. He told them keep it at 10,000 feet, keep the plane under 200 knots, and he wanted the landing gear to be deployed to stay low. He didn't want the plane pressurized, so they were flying at 10,000 feet, and the plane was unpressurized. And then the other thing he told them was those air stairs that are in the back. And the 727 is not like a plane that you usually see today. I think there's a few still in service, but
okay. I'm gonna pull up this picture here.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah. See that? So you see this?
What's special about this is that like it has this in the back, right? So what you mean?
Yeah, you can load the airplane, or you can get on the airplane from a stairway that deploys through the middle of the fuselage in the back, and it had regular doors where you could go up to the gate also. But so this was a product that Boeing produced. He told them to leave them unlocked, and and in those days you were able to lower the.
So while the plane was flying in midair, that lower back part, this part, it was lowered.
He lowered it.
Okay.
Yeah. So they landed in Seattle around 5:39. The plane took off again about 2 hours later, and because that's how long. He told them to keep the cabin dark. He said turn off all the lights, and by this time it was night. It was dark. And he sent everyone else to the front of the plane. Right. So there's only there were only 4 other people on the plane with him, the two flight attendants and the crew. Evidently he spent a lot of time sitting back there by himself, thinking or staring into the dark. The fuselage wasn't completely dark because planes have emergency lighting and that sort of thing. So he had enough light to be able to see. But I surmise that he was trying to keep the plane dark so that the authorities, the FBI and the authorities would have more difficulty seeing the plane. And so the crew stayed in the cockpit and nobody looked back. And if you try to empathize with them, it's like, okay, we got a guy, he's got a bomb, right? So we got to do what he says. So
yeah, I can see what you mean. Like there didn't seem to be much of a choice. You just listened to
it. Right. So I tried to really force myself.
Was the bomb discovered to be real?
The bomb was never recovered. So
the bomb was never recovered.
I surmised that it was not real.
Okay.
The Florence Schaffner said that it looked like it had red cylinders in it, like dynamite, and it had a clock and I think she said a clock, which is a little fishy because if you have a bomb that you're going to use as a weapon, you don't put a clock on it. So that may have been. I don't know if that's true or not, but she thought that it looked like a bomb, right, or it looked like dynamite. So,
but what was she right? Like that's not like knowing what is a bomb and what isn't. It's kind of hard to distinguish unless you're familiar with it. Yeah.
So my guess is he was bluffing. I mean, he didn't act like a he didn't act like a bully or anything. He was very calm about all of it, and that was part of his shtick, if you will. I'll mention that none of that money ever surfaced in circulation. Some of the money was found later, but we'll get to that. That's an interesting story. It was found about nine years later.
Where are we in terms of the story now?
Well, he's on the plane, and the crew and the flight attendants are up forward, and he's in there back by himself. So I was going to turn attention to what the FBI was doing. So when the FBI learned about this, they recorded. I mentioned that they recorded all the serial numbers by hand. They didn't put any dye packs or anything like that. And certainly they didn't have any GPS trackers. The parachutes came from a Seattle sports Sky Sports Center, something like that. And then one of the reserves was later claimed to be not functional, that it was a dummy. But I doubt that very much, and I'll give some reasons for that later. I think that was some kind of attention-seeking story that surfaced about 15 years later. So about that, nobody said that this dummy. It was a dummy. One of the reserves was said to be a dummy, but I don't think you. My thought about it is that a dummy parachute that's used for training has to be marked clearly. Even in 1970, it has to be said, this is not for flight. This is a non-functional. So yeah, he evidently picked that chute, right? He did pick that as his reserve, and then he took the sports chute that they had given him. So the main chute was some kind of sports type parachute, and then the reserve was said to be non-functional, but I'm not necessarily believing it. The FBI thought that he was bluffing. They couldn't believe that he would actually jump, and turns out that they were wrong. So the plane took off around 5:30ish, 5:40, 7:30. It flew for just under an hour after, and the flight crew noticed that they got the signal that the air stairs were down. So he had rolled down the air stairs, and so they were flying with
So just give context. By this point, the regular passengers have already disembarked, right?
Yes, right. He was there by himself. They were flying to Mexico. As far as the crew thought, they were flying to Mexico.
Yeah.
Now, they had already informed him that we're not going to make Mexico at this speed with this fuel consumption.
So they have to go to
at this altitude.
What is it? Reno, Nevada first.
That's right. So they told him that, and he didn't show any protest.
If he was gonna jump off the airplane, why would he care where they're going? Like,
I think that it was a deception.
Okay, it's like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna. It doesn't matter where you go. A half hour later, I'm out of here.
Right. So he told them to fly to Mexico. Right. They said, we can't make Mexico. We can land in Reno and refuel. And he said something to the effect of, sure, whatever, So that made me think that, that was not part of his plan. Exactly. His plan was to jump out, right? That was what he was planning on doing. So around a little before 8 p.m., the crew noticed that the air stairs had been deployed, and then he puttered around for 20 minutes or so. Probably he was maybe trying to secure the money to his body or whatever. And at exactly 8:13, or what the crew recorded at 8:13 p.m., they noticed that the plane kind of like pitched a little bit, and they interpreted that as him jumping off the stairs in the back. So it pitched and maybe
he wasn't controlling the airplane. So how was how did they? It just so happened to be pitching a little bit.
No, they noticed that the plane shuddered a little bit, as though.
Oh, shuddered. Okay, it's from him possibly like just jumping off.
As though 250 pounds had jumped off of the air stairs, right?
Yeah. So, but nobody was there. Was there anybody there observing him jumping off?
Nobody witnessed him jumping out, and they didn't go back to look. They just continued on to Reno. They landed in Reno a little after 10 p.m., so 2 hours later. And when they landed, the air stairs were still down, and Cooper was gone. And the FBI swarmed the plane, looking all over. Maybe he's hiding somewhere. They even I think they even considered that maybe part of the crew was in on it or something like that, which, that would creep me out if somebody accused me of that if I'm on the crew. But so he jumped with 2 parachutes, evidently, the main chute and the civilian sports rig, and the reserve chute, which was smaller and chest mounted. The reserve chute was, again,
so, forgive my
belabor this.
I'm going to be ignorant here and ask you questions on why is it typical to have multiple parachutes?
Yes, that's what people who jump out of planes like to have. They like to have 2 parachutes, because it's a life critical system. I mean, obviously a life critical system.
Okay. So the 2 parachutes is so that if one of them doesn't work, you have a backup, right? Or do you use both parachutes? You don't use both, right? You only use one.
No.
Right.
No. Okay. So there's low probability. There's a low but finite probability that the parachute will get fouled or won't open or gets messed up for some reason. So you have another chute that significantly increases the probability of you living when you reach the ground if you have 2 parachutes. However, the plane was only at 10,000 feet. Okay, so if you're in free fall at 10,000 feet, it takes you less than a minute to hit the ground.
Do the math, and I guess you will hit terminal velocity pretty quickly.
Yes, and so he it seems like he wasn't aware of that. It didn't seem like he knew how critical that was. So really, I think a reserve chute. My thought is a reserve chute was probably not usable at 10,000 feet.
Anyway. Knows about how to, I guess, fake make a bomb, and he also knows how to jump out of airplanes, but he did not realize that he was too low.
Make a fake bomb?
Or I assume he made a fake bomb or whatever it is.
I don't think that requires a lot of technical skill.
Okay,
I could probably make a fake.
Okay, let's forget the bomb making part.
Yeah.
The point is that he knew how to jump out of airplanes, so you would think that he's trained for that. So why would he purposely designate it to be so low to do this? Like the altitude of the airplane.
I don't have an answer for that. I can surmise that he wanted to wanted to reduce his ability to be tracked on radar, and I know that was an issue. Radar, they were tracking the plane by radar, but it was spotty, so that the radar coverage was in and out during this episode. The FBI was also able to get the Air Force to follow him, but they never caught up with the plane, so the Air Force never spotted him on their planes. So the thing is, this is basically what I think happened to him, was that the parachute didn't open. Oh, I didn't mention the weather was horrendous that night. It was raining. Okay. Of course, the wind would be 200 miles per hour when he jumps out of the plane. And he would be soaked immediately. And at 10,000 feet, it's estimated the temperature was under 10 degrees Fahrenheit. So it was brutally cold. He was not prepared with any winter clothing. He didn't have gloves. He just had his regular shoes on, business suit. He did take his tie off, and he left his tie behind, and also a little tie tack, a little ornamental pin to hold the tie in place. He left that behind, so that was a piece of evidence. That's what I believe happened to him. I think that the parachute did not deploy, and he just went, well, if you'd excuse me, he just went splat, right? And there was not a shred of the parachute was ever discovered. And so that's what I happened.
Is that even reasonable to? Okay, so you jump from that altitude, and how is it possible that not one shred of the parachute was ever discovered?
He landed in a place. He landed, and when the body hits the ground, it breaks.
Well,
and
what happens when you jump off an airplane without a fully deployed parachute and you hit the ground? Well, you're probably gonna. I
mean, I have studied that, but I would rather not.
I'm not telling you to go do the experiment yourself.
No, people have studied this, right? I'm just telling you, people have studied this, but I'm too modest to describe the condition of the body when it hits the ground from falling out of an airplane.
Okay, I don't want to necessarily dive into that level of detail, pun intended, by the way.
Dive into it.
But my point here is, even if the body is completely, vaporized to an extent, I would think the parachutes, the metal and whatever plastic parts or whatever it's made of will still be there.
I think it's still there somewhere.
And so if the FBI, I mean, from what I've briefly read, has been investigating. Well, they closed it, I guess, in 2016. But prior to that, it was like over 30 years. So you would think they would have combed the area.
Yeah, you would think. I think that the area that they combed was the wrong area. I think my research seems to indicate that they believed the plane was over a place called Ariel, Washington, and there was a lake there and a river, a tributary to the
Ariel, Washington,
the Columbia River. And I think that the river was called the Lewis River. I think that they looked north. East
Lewis River
or northwest.
Lake Merwin Reservoir.
So one of the things we need to talk about is, I think we can move forward to 1980 because something did surface, and then we can go back and think about the search. In 1980, there was a kid named Brian Ingram. Hey, you got a map of it? Okay, that's excellent.
I'm saying that so this is a map of where they say the where the FBI was looking, right?
Right. Yeah.
So in this particular area.
So the Lake Merwin, there is a dam.
I wish there was I was gonna say I wish you could plot flight path, so that.
Well, in those days, I don't think the flight paths were as well articulated. I mean, they had flight paths, but the tracking, the flight path, they didn't have the kind of tracking that we have today.
So this, in any case, so the FBI in that time, they were looking, I guess, in this vicinity here.
I believe it was in the north. I believe that they were looking north of Ariel, which is there's a town called Ariel near Lake Merwin.
Right.
And I think it's a little bit further, almost in the middle there of the map. Now it's just to the middle and to the right.
I see it right here.
Where Ariel is.
Yeah, this right here.
And I think that they were looking to the northwest of that river.
So, okay. I mean, this is a huge area to search. I can't imagine then.
So, and it's forested. It's a lot of it's public land. A lot of the south of the area is private land. And so what I want to do is I want to jump forward 9 years to February of 1980, and then I'm going to go back. Okay, so allow me to go forward and tell this little story, little thing. There was a boy named Brian Ingram, and his family was visiting the Columbia River, which is that big river that goes north-south in your map, along a stretch. And there's a place called Tenabar, Tenabar, and so he was just messing around like everyone who was ever an 8-year-old boy, probably some 8-year-old girls also, although well, never mind. He was digging in the sand, and he came upon 3 bundles of $20 bills, and it's like, oh wow, I'm not.
I mean, that's a lot of money for a little kid.
Yeah, it was $5,800, and he probably sat around thinking, I wonder how I can keep my parents from knowing about this, But then he did tell his parents, and it turned out that the serial numbers in fact matched some of the money that had been not marked but recorded. So they matched the Cooper ransom tranche of money that they had given. It was only $5,800. It was just 3 batches, 3
so clearly not the
bundles.
Full 200K. That was
no. They were decayed. They had obviously been buried in the sand for years. They were decayed. The rubber bands. The literature makes a big deal about the rubber bands still being intact. I don't know that I'm not that impressed with that. Saying, well, rubber bands decay. That's true. It's an organic material, but so is the paper. I don't think it's not more significant to me that the rubber bands survived, and that the paper that the money was made out of survived. It said that the bundles had bank bands. I don't know if you ever gotten money. We don't really use cash very much anymore.
Wait. I got money. Hold up. Where's my money? What am I showing here? Cash? I got $20. This is what wait, camera. $20.
Yeah. I've actually used cash from time to time. Sometimes I'll check, I'll hold up the bill and I'll say, if it's a young person, I'll go, do you know what this is? And everybody still seems to recognize it.
I mean, all right. So, okay, but so these cash though, like you're saying, like there's identifiers somewhere, right? That tells you what bank.
Yeah, there's a serial number.
Where is it? Like this one?
We'll do that.
PE something? This?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Right.
Wait.
Wow.
Wow, like that. That's a serial number, right?
Right.
So that matched what the bank gave the guy like 30 years ago, or I guess at that point it was like 15 years ago or something. Like 1980s, right? You said this was
The little boy found 3 bundles of cash buried in the sand, right? And that was a kind of a break in the case. Okay. So the condition of the bill suggested that they had been buried, that they were not floating in the water, or just had the rubber bands were intact, and so that means that they hadn't been.
Sorry, go on.
So, so if we go back in time now, that's forward in time, 1980. If we go back in time, that means that wherever Cooper landed was not that far from the river. I think it means that he did not land in Lake Merwin, which is one of the theories. He landed in the water, and of course it was freezing cold.
Let's see where.
And,
Okay, so
yeah.
Let's go back to the map here. So he did not land in this water.
I don't think he landed in the lake because I don't think that money would survive. If he landed in the lake, it would be waterlogged for time, and then it would just sink to the bottom.
Okay,
I think he landed close to. And then the other thing is, like, if it washed into Lake Merwin, then it would make its way to the dam, and then it would sink, right? And then the dam has its hydroelectric facility, and it would go through and it would just get all ground up. All right. I think that Cooper went splat somewhere along the south side of that river, Lewis River. Is that what it's called? The Lewis River. And it was not more than.
River right here is the Lewis River. Like, at least that's what it says on the map.
I think it couldn't have been more than a mile or so from the river where he landed. And I think he died at that point. I think he's still there, or parts of him.
You think he was? So when he jumped off the airplane, I mean, from what I briefly read, it seemed like he's familiar with the area. So
I don't have any evidence. I don't know of any evidence that makes me think that he was familiar with the area.
Never mind. I just completely made that up. Ignore me, guys.
I don't. You have to understand he is a completely anonymous character, other than a pseudonym that he wrote. The only thing we know about him is that he said his name was Dan Cooper.
I mean, obviously
he drinks bourbon and water.
I mean, like, there's, if his real name was Dan Cooper, the FBI would have found info way, like, sooner.
I presume so. He didn't leave any fingerprints.
Okay.
So
if he didn't land here, where did he land?
He landed somewhere near the south side of the Lewis River. And the reason I say that is that the money found in 1980, I surmise, floated all the way down and joined the Columbia River, and
Columbia River is this giant.
And then there is a place called Tina Bar that's on the east side of the Columbia River, where the little boy was digging and found the money.
How do you spell Tina Bar?
Tenabar.
I'm gonna find that.
Right.
Let me.
This is what I wanted to do. This I wanted to have a map to refer to. I'm
gonna find that. T-E what?
T-E-N-A. T-E. T Tom. E Edward. N Nora. A Adam.
Tina Bar. Wait. T-I-N-A. That's what you mean.
Oh, maybe.
Tina in Vancouver?
No, it's in Washington State.
Okay, I found it. Oh, it's just called Vancouver, Washington. All right, that's the vicinity. All right, here. Yeah. I haven't discovered anything. I just found it on maps.
Okay. All right, that's really good. So you have a mark there, and then further north, you see it all. That all fits.
This is going to be part of my travel plans. Want to go? I'm going to find this place in real life.
Right.
Sure. All right. So this is Lake Merwin up here, and so the money or whatever, he landed splat somewhere here, according to Leonard, and then the money, some of it went in the river, and over a decade, it kind of migrated down here into the Columbia, and then eventually. Yeah, go ahead.
Correction. I don't think it migrated down there over a period of a decade. I think it migrated down there over the period of a week or so. Okay. I think it floated and then finally got into a sandbar where it got buried, and it was buried there
that's not too far. I mean, that's like what?
Right.
How many miles? Whatever that is.
Mm-hmm. It seems perfectly consistent. If he had landed in the lake, the way people sometimes say, if he had landed in that lake, I don't think the money could have made it down there, because it's in a body of water where it just floats for a time.
This is a dam, so it's like it won't get out unless they open it up, right? I don't know.
Right.
I guess it could have.
I suppose it's possible,
So
but that's
why do people think, like, you know, for all intents and purposes, it seems like people are saying the mystery is that, well, you know, well, it's already interesting that he did all this, jump off an airplane, all that, but like, I guess the point is we haven't found any physical evidence of the parachutes or his body, and we have no idea who he actually is. And so there's
that's
that
right.
lingering mystery where he might be alive. Is that what it is?
I think it's almost impossible that he's alive.
Why do you say
I
it's
mean,
impossible that he's alive?
because I put myself in his place, standing at the foot of the or at the top of the stairs, looking out into the darkness with the rain coming down, shivering, trying to stay warm because it's 10 degrees. It's at least 10 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay.
My fingers are numb. I'm looking out there. I'm thinking, man, I think I made a mistake, but I don't want to get caught. So
you're saying his mental state at the point right before he jumped is thinking, I'm probably gonna die, but this is the best option I got. Jump off.
I think so. I think at that point it was the best option.
Oh my
He
gosh.
could have, he couldn't go any higher because he didn't have the equipment to stay alive. It was too cold. He
Yeah.
didn't have the equipment. He was soaking wet by the time he got to the ground. I don't think he opened the parachute. I don't know why he didn't open the parachute. That's a very difficult thing for me to understand, but it could have, there's all kinds of could haves. Okay, all kinds of could haves at that point. He's jumping into a 200 mile per hour.
I'm intrigued by some of the other stories of where he is alive. So how do people explain, like, why was the money never used? Like, how would they explain that?
I'm not here to explain that. That's, to me, that's the explanation of it by itself. That means he didn't make it. Okay. Or if he made it, he never recovered the money.
Right.
So he lost, let me be clear about this. None of this money, zero of this money, zero of the money ever turned up in circulation. Okay. And they were looking for it. Okay. They were looking for it. And so the only bills that were ever recovered was from this little boy playing in the mud.
You know what you need to do is just send a bunch of little boys and girls just to go dig around in the sandbanks.
Oh, believe me, that area has been turned upside down.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
Okay. So what happened? What probably happened was, he hit the ground and he just like went poof, right? And probably the bag that had the money in it broke open. The parachutes probably still just did not deploy. And a parachute is a big thing. If he had survived, maybe he could have gathered up the parachute, maybe in the dark, maybe he could have gone somewhere, hitchhiked. Maybe he had we didn't have cell phones, so he'd have to find a payphone somewhere to call somebody. I'm sure that the FBI looked at all of the payphone records, right? Some kind of trace of him would occur. So you have to look at what they call Occam's razor. What's the most likely thing that fits all of these facts? And that is that he hit the ground and his body was damaged, and animals came and scattered the bones around, and he's still there. I mean, so it's much like, it's a mystery. I grant that it's a mystery. And so, but the fact that
explain everything about what probably happened, how is it still a mystery?
Because people are motivated people are motivated to enjoy knowing something that somebody else doesn't know, or trying to think, outthink, the FBI was incompetent. It does look like the FBI did some incompetent things.
Yeah.
And then this kind of thing where somebody just vanishes without a trace captures the imagination, and people have motivated reasoning to try to reinforce that, that he survived somehow. Now, I will say this. I will say this, that it is just possible to get away with small amounts of money. This was $200,000, right? If he had just spent small amounts here and there, the money could eventually make its way to the bank and might not be noticed. And then when money is retired, through the Federal Reserve, when they take notes out of circulation because they're too old, right. they don't reconcile the serial numbers. They just send it to a place to get it shredded, right? And so it is just possible that some of the money could have entered circulation, but if it goes into a bank vault, in that epoch, in that period, they were looking for it, and we do know that some of the money did show up in 1980. So anyway, he jumped.
Go ahead.
I think there's evidence that at 8:13 on November 24th, Cooper jumped into 20 degree, maybe air that was 20 degrees temperature. It was at night. It was in the rain, soaking wet. He didn't have a helmet. He didn't know what altitude he was at. Right now, if I'm jumping out of the plane, I'm gonna pull the ripcord as soon as I can. I don't know why.
You're not gonna wait. Like, why would you?
I'm not gonna wait. His fingers were cold. I don't know. He had he really could not have had any idea where he was. He had no way to time his descent. It was dark. There was no visibility. And it was pouring down rain. So if the chute didn't open, or if it opened too late, he would have died instantly. And even the reserve chute was irrelevant, because he would not have had time to. You need, I said 55 seconds to get to the ground from 10,000 feet, but really you need some time
for the parachute to open, deploy.
Yeah,
all that, I would think.
Right.
Yeah.
So he only had 20 or 30 seconds in order to pull the cord on it, and even if he did open it, he was landing in the dark, among trees and rivers and cliffs.
It sounds like a really dangerous place to try to land anything.
Yeah, right. Sure. And at night, and I don't think regular skydivers, people who are experienced skydivers, would attempt that.
Most skydivers don't try to hijack airplanes.
As far as we know, not a single bill was ever spent of that money. No body was found, no chute, and no gear. Now, okay, so do you have any questions about that?
I mean, I've been asking you question after question, but
I don't really have very much. Yeah. 4 months later.
4 months later after what?
4 months after D.B. Cooper committed this crime, the man we know as D.B. Cooper, there was a man named Richard Floyd McCoy Jr.
What a funny name. All right, but go on.
He hijacked United Airlines 272. It was also the same kind of airplane. It was a copycat. He demanded $500,000. He wanted 4 parachutes. He jumped out the rear air stairs over Utah. It was a flight that was going from the.
So this guy, he just did the same thing, just about.
Yeah, it was a copycat, right?
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah, and he succeeded. He landed. He survived. Okay. He left fingerprints. He used his real name on the ticket. He was spotted carrying parachute gear. He was arrested, and he was tried and found guilty, and sentenced to 45 years in prison. 2 years later, he escaped from prison.
Wait, this sounds like an intriguing story of its own. Like, who is this guy?
This is McCoy. He made a fake gun somehow and was able to escape. He made it out of
Oh my
soap
goodness.
or
So
something. Yeah,
let me see if I can. Richard McCoy Jr.
right.
Yeah. Okay. Here, let me see if I.
Okay.
Wow. So.
He even resembled Cooper. All right. So
Wait. So did they think that he is the guy?
some people said, look, this is a copycat, and
This
you know,
well, that's a great picture of him. He doesn't look very
yeah,
happy, but
right. I think
who
that's a
would?
mugshot.
Oh wait, that is a mugshot. 1972 mugshot. You're right. Who would look happy on a mugshot?
Right.
I don't.
I
Hey,
don't
don't ask
even
me
look
that.
happy on my driver's license picture.
Okay,
So
you should see mine. I'm kidding.
I always try to look like I would when the cops stop me, you know.
All right, so that's his 1972 mugshot. Richard McCoy, who, for all intents and purposes, was successful in hijacking the airplane and jumping off,
Right.
and surviving. Right. So
this
yeah.
this is very exciting, right? Like maybe he's Cooper.
Yeah. Did he say he was Cooper?
No, he didn't say he was Cooper.
Oh, okay.
Okay. He also had an alibi. He was in the National Guard and on duty in Utah.
Oh yeah. How could he possibly
during the Cooper
airplane
period? Yeah. The FBI picked him up at his house. I mean, he wasn't. It didn't seem to be the brightest bulb on the string, you know. But the thing that really clinches it for me. So here we can use our Karl Popper falsification regime.
So I
right?
find this interesting. McCoy was arrested 2 days after McCoy was on National Guard duty and flying one of the helicopters in search for the hijacker. But he himself was a hijacker.
Yeah.
So he was.
Maybe that's how he got the idea. But listen. So a lot of people will grab onto this and they will select elements of that to say, look, he looked like Cooper. It was the same kind of thing. He asked for parachutes, and it was absolutely, he had to have been Cooper. Look at the resemblance between him and Cooper. And so what you do is you start with this is like almost like a fallacy. You start with a hypothesis, and then you look for all of the reasons to support the hypothesis. Okay.
Right. That's not how you want to do things, right?
That's not how you do science. Okay. You start with a hypothesis. You might observe things that support the hypothesis, but then you look for things that will disprove the hypothesis.
To disprove something, you only got to prove you only have to show at least one thing that is wrong.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, you could have some weak conclusions about that. But the thing is, what people do through motivated reasoning is they're excited about this. Man, I've solved this case, and while the FBI has been, dilly-dallying or whatever pejorative thing you can say about the FBI.
Like, you think you're smarter than the FBI
because you think you're smarter than the FBI, and then you get great satisfaction. Okay, so one of the things I thought was there were two women who spent over 4 hours with DB Cooper. One of the two women.
Let's see. Do we remember their names? Okay,
I have them.
I'm gonna cheat and naturally look things up since I can't remember names. I mean, I barely remember.
I can't. Florence. Florence Schaffner.
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 Yeah. And the other one was Tina Mucklow.
Yeah.
Mucklow.
So Schaffner spent lots of time with him. She talked to him, and so you're thinking, wow, if McCoy was Cooper, maybe we should ask.
Yeah, these are the flight attendants.
We should ask Schaffner whether McCoy is the man that she spent 4 hours with in 1971, 4 months earlier. And I guess people presume that was never done or something, but in fact, she was asked by the FBI. She said categorically, that is not the man. The man that I talked to was older. Okay. His voice was different. She made both of them made categorical statements that it was not him.
Okay. And you got to believe it.
I don't really need anything else. Okay.
I mean, you would hope that her memory isn't so horrible that she would just make up something
4 months later.
Yeah.
The other thing is that, in fact, I said that Cooper didn't leave any fingerprints. The FBI did think they had a thumbprint from the armrest of his seat that looked pretty good. That they didn't match that to they didn't match it to McCoy. So I believe McCoy was a copycat, and he actually escaped a couple years later. I believe he was killed in a shootout
with FBI.
With the FBI, I think he was killed.
Yeah. What kind of life is that?
Yeah. Oh, they also found almost all of the money in his house. All the money that they had delivered, the $500,000.
Okay, so McCoy, I'm reading this right now. At the time, FBI does not consider him a suspect in the Cooper case because of mismatches in agent description. McCoy was 29 years old with projecting ears. Skydiving skills much greater than thought to be possessed by Cooper. Incredible evidence that McCoy was in Las Vegas on the day of the Portland hijacking and at home in Utah the day after, having Thanksgiving dinner with his family. Okay.
So Cooper is still missing, right? So there are some other clues.
So, but in 2024, McCoy's 2 kids, well, I guess they're adults now, but anyway, 2 children, publicly stated that their father had been D.B. Cooper.
Yeah.
After a parachute was found by YouTuber Dan Grider on the property formerly owned by McCoy's mother. I don't know.
That sounds very, very convenient to me. I mean, so was there a book written? I mean, I really will take the categorical statement from the flight attendants who spent time with Cooper before I would listen to anything else. To me, that's very.
Maybe they just want attention. Who knows? You're right. Why could it, if this was true, why didn't they just say this earlier, right? Yeah, as well.
That's another point. So there was there's some other evidence, like he left his tie. He left cigarettes. I don't believe he left the note. The note was typewritten, and there's the what I've read about that it's not clear whether the note. Some say that the note was he retrieved the note. Others say that note, but the note would be very important because it was typewritten, and typewriters can be traced, through the forensic. There were lots and lots of fingerprints in the airplane, and they all these leads kind of evaporated. So now the tie it yielded a little bit of DNA, but it didn't.
What was special about the tie?
He left it. He took it off and left it.
I guess
that's
right. Yeah.
And so in 1971 they didn't have DNA profiling. We didn't know how to do the polymerase amplification of DNA.
Person here.
Well, I know we didn't have that in 1971. But in the 90s they did it started coming online.
Okay. So they have the tie still, right? Or at least when the technology developed to the point where they could do DNA stuff.
They were able to pull some DNA. It was said to be too degraded, and in any event, they never were able to match it to anyone in their databases, in their DNA databases. Anyway, the investigation, the FBI investigation had 60 volumes with thousands and thousands of pages. They had hundreds of suspects. and that nothing ever led to him. So
It's
that's
so
where we
crazy
are.
that even with modern technology, and I don't know. I mean, I know some cases like years later with improved forensics, you're able to solve them, but like that you couldn't do decades before. But I guess
Well,
this is
you can't if there's nothing to compare it to. If he never had a record, evidently he didn't have a record, a police record. He must not have been in the military, or else,
Mhm.
because fingerprints are always taken, for the military. So it still remains a mystery, but the fact that none of the money ever showed up spent, there's no way you could launder it. I rack my brains trying to think about, okay, what could you do to exchange this money for something else? I'm thinking you could spend it a little at a time, and probably get away with that. But that's very important. The fact that no parachute was ever found, it would mean that if he got on the ground, maybe he could, gather up the parachute, and stick it back in the bag. I don't know. But I believe he's dead. I don't think that I don't think you could jump 10,000 feet and survive in that cold and wet, and so
We can always speculate.
yes.
But
So I
the
think
case
I covered.
closed was 2016. FBI, after all this time, decided we're done with this. We're closing it. So
That's right.
um,
So
this doesn't mean, however, that anyone who's actually still interested aren't still looking into it. So I know.
right. I mean, I think all of us kind of secretly want him to have made it somehow. I mean, he didn't hurt anybody, right?
It sounds like
Okay,
a
but
very calm way of hijacking an airplane.
he could have hurt people. I mean, he could have miscalculated. I don't think he wanted to hurt anybody. He didn't make any kind of speeches or political
What
demands, or
leads me to wonder, yeah, like what kind of person this is, huh?
right. I wonder too. I don't have a good model for that. We want him to have made it. We want him to be clever enough to vanish, to maybe bury the money somewhere. Maybe he lived out his days in South America, sipping bourbon and reading the headlines.
I mean, by this point, he's most likely deceased. No, I guess no, he could still be alive. Never mind.
He could be 80 something. That's not the
Yeah,
story I found. Yeah.
The flight attendants, so they say he was like, I mean, from the sketches as well, he looks like he's probably in his like 30s or 40s, or maybe
No, they said that he was 40 something.
40 something. Yeah. Okay.
Something between 35 and 45, maybe.
Right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, here, check this out. You know what this is?
What?
This is money.
Oh, that's the money. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a money from
yeah.
the little boy, Brian Ingram.
Little boy.
1988.
Yeah.
Discovering.
Yeah.
This
so
is
I'm
what
trying to imagine. I know that's how I
that's what
imagine
happens
it
to your
from my
money
point of view.
if you put it in the river, guys.
Right.
It's
Are those old style? Those are old style notes. The portrait looks pretty big compared to a little. There's.
Wait, hold up.
I don't know. I just have a question. You know that.
Right? Let me see here.
No. You're holding up a $20 bill that was made in the 21st century. These are $20 bills that were printed.
How is this
portrait
different?
is not that big. That's a modern one. The portrait.
Well, I don't have one from the 1970s. I mean, come on. You pull them out of circulation, no? Like you were saying.
I'm here to tell you, okay, as a witness, all right? I'm here to tell you that $20 bills in 1971 did not look like that $20 bill.
Wait. So the one here is not what it looked like in the 1970s?
I don't know. I'm asking a question. The portrait, the size of the portrait looks too big to me.
This one.
but I don't know. I'm not. I mean, the rest of the note has been degraded all the way around, right? So maybe that's giving me the impression that the portrait is much bigger.
How would you? I mean, aren't on the okay? So like for instance, my money right here, cash, it says Series 2017A. So I presume this was printed in 2017.
That's not necessarily true. That's just when that note went into circulation. So, but listen carefully, Shan. Okay, I'm a witness. All right, I have personal knowledge about what a $20 bill looked like in 1971. It did not look like this $20 bill you're holding in your hand. The portrait was much.
And it also did not look like the one on the screen.
That's a question I'm raising.
Gotcha.
The portrait, the size of the portrait of it does look like Jackson, but the size of that portrait looks bigger than what I would expect from what I remember the notes looked like in 71.
I mean,
prior to about 1990, they started changing the money.
FBI, you know, that's the I don't know. So
that's just a question. Probably it's correct. Probably it is, and it's just sort of an optical illusion that's generated by the fact that the outer parts of the note are degraded so much, have been eroded around. But
I guess the FBI website doesn't work. I was trying to find it. Is it still around?
Is what still around?
No, FBI. The original link, Wikipedia. I guess it's not there anymore. It's okay. I guess
well, anyway,
investigating it. It's all good.
Anyway, the legend kind of continues. Cooper didn't say much. He wasn't angry. He didn't stand up and give a manifesto like some of the hijackers. He didn't kill anyone. He just boarded the plane, took the money, and disappeared. And for over 50 years, we've been filling in the silence.
The silence is filled by all of our speculations.
That's right.
That's what happened.
I've seen him called a genius, which I don't know if he's a genius or not.
If he just jumped off the plane and ended up flat on the ground, how is that a genius?
He might have been a genius, but just not enough of a genius. Okay. Some people think he's a ghost, an alien, a folk hero, criminal mastermind, but the truth might be simpler. He may have just been a man. He was desperate in some respect. He was smart. I think he was smart, but he wasn't immortal. He wasn't invisible. He wasn't magic. He jumped into the dark wearing street clothes and cheap loafers, holding a canvas bag stuffed with cash, and no one, and I mean no one, ever saw him again. And there's something about that, something that keeps this story alive. It could be the timing. It was Thanksgiving. It was before airport security changed, and actually that event had a lot to do with the airport security that we suffer through today. And right before the hijacking area came to an end, this event occurred. And so it was like one man slipping out the back door of America's most mythologized decade. That I don't know, but
I don't know. I mean, you lived in that time.
Yeah, so. A quiet man in a black suit lowering the stairs of a jetliner midair and stepping into a legend.
Into the abyss. Never to
into the abyss.
Yes.
So
the void left behind these mysteries. Yep.
Yeah. I hope people are entertained by this and informed by this, and you could leave your comments. And
you can always leave your comments.
Leave comments and tell us how we did and what you think of the show, and that's all I had to say.
I think this has been quite the wrap. I mean, what do you guys think? Anybody out there, feel free to put some commentary on right now or later, assuming you're watching this episode much later. And
yeah, to our viewers 10,000 years in the future,
Oh, by the way, for people who want to read more about this, since one of my friends just texted me, how do we find out more? What would you say? What's out there? Are there other?
There's a whole bunch of books. There's a book about real McCoy. You can try to read that, but I think the flight attendants put that all to bed.
I like you're saying there's okay. There's a book about, I don't know. How did you find all this info, by the way? What was your source, DB Leonard?
Just reading on the internet.
Just reading on the internet. Okay. There is a lot out there. I mean, if you look up DB Cooper, you will find quite a lot of books. I'm not sure how good they are, but people like to speculate, right, and bring up these theories. One of them, for instance, I think I just found whatever this is, Into the Blast: The True Story of DB Cooper. Like I said, I am not at all sure if this is any good. Oh, I got 270 reviews, 4.3 stars. That's something. So yeah, you can find other ones. DB Cooper himself never wrote a book, obviously.
No, he seems to have appeared.
So, yeah,
he entered history on one day for one day.
Yeah,
and for less than a day. He entered history on November 24th, 1971, and he left that very same day. And I think that if he's still there. I think the parts of the buckles on the parachute, the nylon, ripstop nylon, has a very long lifetime, especially if it's buried.
You are saying there is a possibility that, say, in the next decade or two, or coming decades, we could find more evidence in that area because those materials.
I think it's possible, and it's quite remarkable. I believe that the FBI looked in the wrong place.
Okay.
And or else they would have found him.
So we're gonna be like another little kid just playing around and then just finding something else.
Well, I believe that section of the Columbia River has been thoroughly excavated for people looking for money. I always try to imagine how the little kid felt, little boy.
I mean, I'm just thinking if I was like that little kid and I found all this money, I don't know, I would definitely go back and try to find more. Like, why wouldn't I?
Well, I mean, children, 8-year-old children don't have very much agency about stuff like that, so I might be tempted to try to hide it, so that I didn't tell anybody about it. And that would, but that's me,
Okay, so I just had a great idea.
Yeah.
But probably this is not I mean, I'm not the only one who's thought of this, right? Do people go over there to try to find more money?
That's what I'm just trying to tell you. I can guarantee that section of the Columbia River has been excavated and dug up.
Money.
Right, for the past 40 years, So I guarantee that people have been out there. I think you can even go on. What is it? There's a TV show. There's a guy that does the investigation files, or I can't remember the name of the show. He even went back there with the kid all grown up, right?
Okay. And to try to find more.
And so they took metal detectors out there. I don't know what the metal detector was not the right kind of technology.
Okay.
Looking for but and with the kid, all grown and I can't remember the name of that show, but
okay. So I guess a tip for you guys who are wanting to find money from this hijacking episode, you're unlikely to. So, but obviously, if you're curious, you can fly out there and look around and explore history along the edges of those riverbanks, right? So
and the thing is, the fact that money was found on the banks buried along the banks of the river, to me means that Cooper landed close to the river, or perhaps in the river. He could have landed in the river, and you get the same result. And when you hit water as you do when you hit ground. you make a splat. So, but yeah.
Wait, okay. So if without a parachute, if you jump out of an airplane and you land in water, you're also going to die.
Yeah, it's the same. It's kind of the same result. So,
okay.
Yeah,
good to know.
Yeah. People have difficulty believing that, but
it kind of makes sense since the velocity of impact is not
the velocity is about 230 miles per hour.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what you're
like
hitting.
That.
You're going to
Depending upon whether you're tumbling, whether you're coming down belly first, that would be exciting.
Your body cannot sustain that kind of momentum transfer. Yep.
Yeah. So anyway.
All right, everyone.
That's all I wanted to say.
So, I used to say look up because you never know what you'll see. I might as well throw that in there again. But
in this case, it's like look down.
Look down. In this case, I was thinking look down because you don't know what you'll find. Yeah. So don't just look up, guys. Look down as well. Right?
I do have living memory. I do have living memory of DB Cooper and those hijackings, right? So and as I related at the beginning of the show, I told you about it was part of almost became part of the usually like a comic culture, and people started to become it almost became routine. Mm-hmm. So, and I guess that's another interesting thing to relate to people. So.
That is, many of us not of your era did not live in that time, and so did not realize this.
I feel sorry for you. I
got no words. Leonard.
We had better music. I mean, by far, like Led Zeppelin, Janis Joplin, even Jefferson Airplane.
So Leonard with his DB Leonard. Any further words you would like to say on this topic?
No. I think we covered it. I think it was a good show.
So with all that said, then for you guys who enjoyed the show, you please like, subscribe, share. I know this is a really long name. I mean, I just threw it on here, but obviously if you're watching this episode, you can just click on SGT on Space and you will see all the other episodes. So I've had the ticker running on the bottom. Thank you to Chip Birch for making the theme song for the show, beginning and end. I don't think it's too loud this time, so you guys should have been able to hear intelligent words that's coming out of our mouth, or semi-intelligent, however that may be. Feel free to support the show, like I said, on patreon.com/SGT-on-Space. And thank you to Kyle Maker and John Grace for your donations, other folks as well for just supporting it on there. So with all that said, we will be back next week where we will talk about another.
What do you want to talk about? I haven't given any thought, but
I mean, I will give it a thought soon enough. So
okay.
If we talk about other things, like we said, we may change the name of the show to something else, like Curious Minds or something. I don't know, inquiries. But we will let.
I think that's a good idea because there's all kinds of interesting things to talk about.
There is. I don't want to.
And this is so much fun. I got to tell you, this is really, really very edifying and fun to do.
All right,
Leonard. The reason I do it.
On air, how much he enjoys being on air. That's right. That's.
Bye. Yeah. Good night.
Okay, take care, everybody. All right.
Namaste.
Share and all that wonderful stuff.
Shalom.
Shalom.